Welcome back to another boardroom briefing. I am your host, Paul Maskill, and today we are talking about one of, if not the most misunderstood issues in the residential home service space, pricing. We are going to get into pricing. There's a great chance that your cost structure is the thing that's actually broken, which then leads to pricing. So, why do most owners believe they have a pricing problem when they actually have a cost structure problem? To me, the easiest part is because pricing is very transparent. We just see exactly what the price is, and that tells us. But when we get into cost, we don't actually know our cost and what it costs us to operate, to send a technician out. What's our overhead? What's our labor rate? All those things. So we just look at pricing and say, that's the issue. So if you have ever said one of these things, we can't charge more in our market. Our market's just tapped out. Or our competitors are already cheaper. There's no way we can change our pricing. Or there's no way customers will pay these prices. You ever said any of those? Yet you continue to do, in your mind, good dollar amount revenue. We're, like I said, 5, 8, 3, whatever it is, how many millions of dollars we're doing. But we constantly feel the constraint on margin and cash. This conversation is going to be for you. Like a lot of our conversations, we are getting right into the numbers. This is not about motivation. This is not about, making your ego feel better. This is getting straight to the numbers and what makes or breaks a successful home service company. This is a boardroom level financial conversation, hence the name of the show. And we're going to dig into how pricing, labor, and overhead actually interact between the struggling businesses and the successful businesses. So here's the illusion. Most owners just blame pricing because pricing is the most visible lever in the business. Hey, we charge $650 for a surge protector, or we charge $250 to put in a faucet, whatever it might be. But then customers complain, technicians hear objections, technicians will tell you, comfort advisor will tell you, these prices are crazy, I can't sell it at this price. They said so-and-so competitor was lower. So what's the usual suspect on why we're getting all these objections? Pricing. So from the owner's perspective, i.e. most likely you, the thinking sounds like, well, if we raise prices, we're going to lose more jobs and we can't lose any more revenue. We need more revenue to solve our cash flow problem. Or if we raise those prices, what's going to happen to our volume? Nobody's going to say yes. Our technicians are going to quit. The phones are going to stop ringing if we raise our prices. We start really making all these excuses and things and making things up in our head that we convince ourselves that they're true. So we just keep doing what we're doing and say, well, if we just go do more revenue, we'll solve the problem. Common theme in this show. That is not the problem, because where we're at, it feels like we're already risky. It feels like cash flow is already tight. Business is already struggling. And if we start messing with pricing, if anything drops, we are going to be stuck. So instead of changing pricing, instead of looking at our costs, what do we do instead? We start discounting to close jobs. We give our comfort advisor, our service manager, the ability to give discounts. And that gets really messy. In my opinion, I would never discount anything, because the minute you discount something is the minute your customer no longer trusts you. I equate this to when you go buy a vehicle at a dealership, they have a price listed, and then pretty much the first thing we say is, well, what can you do on that? What's the best you can do? And they go back to this mysterious room, or they send a mysterious message on their computer, and they hear back from their finance manager, oh, we can actually do it for $42,500 instead of $43,000. And now you're thinking, well, if you can do it for $42,500, why can't you do it for $42,000? Because obviously $43,000 wasn't the real price. So who's to say $42,500 is? That's, to me, the number one issue with discounting. The other issue is, if you give Joe a discount on his surge protector, and then Joe's neighbor calls and you give Joe's neighbor the full price, now they're going to think you're trying to rip them off, because like, Joe, my neighbor, said he paid $600 for that surge protector and you're charging me $650. Get out of my house. I don't trust you. So not only does discounting really hurt your financials, it also hurts your reputation, in my opinion, and the trustworthy. And it just really fits in with what most homeowners think about home service business. We can't trust them because we've had bad experiences in the past. So that's one thing we do to try and solve our issues of we don't have enough cash, is we just need more volume. We also then start offering financing, which, if done right, to me, financing is a great tool because even the most wealthy people in this country, they love using other people's money. However, if we add financing and we don't factor in the cost of financing in our final price, we are then losing death by 1,000 cuts, 3% here, 5% here, 8% here, 2% here. And that slowly erodes our cash flow, but we can't feel it immediately like we can feel pricing. Oh, we lowered our price or gave a discount, we got the sale. Oh, it must work. Let's keep doing it. And then lastly, we've talked about it, I think, in our previous episode, but just chasing more volume. If we just continue to chase more volume to make up the difference and try and solve our cash flow issues, it's only going to make it worse. So, however, like I said, it creates an illusion that, well, we fixed our pricing issue. Everyone's saying yes, and we're at a good spot. Our technicians aren't complaining. Our customers are happy, and we're busier than ever. But if we're busier than ever, but not more profitable than ever, it doesn't really matter. So what is the real financial cause of our cash flow issues when it comes to pricing? It's actually the cost structure is not in line with what we are charging. So kind of two different conversations, because a lot of times when we think our pricing is wrong, we usually think it's too high. But when we look at costs, we don't really actually know. But when we boil it down, usually our costs are not aligned with our pricing, which usually means we actually need to charge more in order to get financially healthy, even though many people think, well, we just need to get more sales, so let's lower our price so we don't have to worry about it. So in almost every $5 to $10 million home service business, especially on the residential side, especially on the service side, pricing isn't too low, quote unquote, too low in isolation. It's simply misaligned with the cost structure that the business is actually carrying, because we don't actually know all of our numbers when it comes to cost. And that's what we're going to get into today is, where does this usually show up? What are like the 2 or 3 areas of cost structure that are slowly eroding our profitability, our cash flow, and our margins? So the first is, if you want to call it, labor burden. So most owners underestimate the true cost of labor. And then when they do look at the true cost of labor, they tell themselves, nobody's going to pay that, so let's just ignore it and lower our prices. That'll work long enough, and it'll be stressful enough, and eventually you'll run out of money, or you'll run out of time, and your business will not be there anymore. If you look at the small business, or the SBA stats and the government stats on how the survival of businesses, there's a reason a lot of them fail, and it's because they run out of money. A lot of times they run out of money because they don't understand their cost structure and what they actually need to charge in order to get there. So what is labor burden? Labor burden is not only it's your wages, but all the other things that go into employing somebody at your company. So it's the payroll taxes, it's the benefits. So, are you offering medical? Are you offering vision? Are you offering dental? It's the time to train them. So whether it's the onboarding time, or it's the weekly training, or it's you do training twice a week, whatever it might be, we're not recovering those costs. It's the non-billable hours. So on the service side of things, most home service companies their technicians are working less than 50% of the time. So if they're working a 40-hour week, a really good service tech is usually only working, quote unquote, turning the wrench and making money for 20 hours. So we got to recover those other 20 hours when we're billing for the first 20 hours that we're actually working. If you look on the install side, usually a target is like 75%. Out of an 8-hour day, they're going to work 6 hours, because they're usually just going to one job, maybe 2 jobs, but they're working there all day. And it's already guaranteed, like they don't have to sell anything, right? Where a service tech or a comfort advisor, they actually have to sell something before the possibility of revenue is even there, versus install. Every day that they're working, they are at least, working on average 75% of the time. So those 2 hours, driving there, driving back, lunchtime, pack up time, whatever it might be, talking to the customer time. So non-billable hours slowly eat away our margin as well. And then another thing is just inefficiency, like from a dispatch/technician side. So, we talked about this in the last episode as well, but how efficient are our techs? How efficient are their routes? How efficient is our office? And then when it comes from callbacks and warranty work, and all that, how much time are we actually spending on that? Are we tracking it so we can recover that cost when we're actually billing out for our other work? Workers' comp, depending on your industry, depending on the state you live in, all the things, workers' comp is very expensive. and it's usually attributed to the work that we're doing out in the field. So we got to recover that cost. Unemployment insurance. So depending on your state, you also have to pay unemployment insurance. You got to pay all that money in, regardless if you use it or not. And then lastly, paid time off, holidays, what federal holidays, how much paid time off do they get? We got to recover that as well. So there's a lot of things that go into labor other than just what we pay them to show up. So that's really the biggest misalignment in cost is our labor burden. When labor is only viewed as an hourly wage, pricing looks fine. It's like, oh, we charged $400 for that, and our guy was there for 2 hours. We only paid him $50. We're doing great. But when you look at everything else, you're probably not doing great. When we start to look at labor as the quote unquote fully loaded, you've probably heard people say that on podcasts, on social media, if you're at any best practices, fully loaded just means all of those things that we just talked about, payroll, tax, benefits, training time, all that. We got to account for that as well. Because when we do, our pricing is usually not even close to what it needs to be. So that's usually the first issue by far when it comes to understanding our cost structure. The second biggest one is our overhead is built for a much bigger business. Now, I understand we have to do this to a certain extent, but I see plenty of companies where their office, the payroll that they're paying for their office staff is that of an $8 to $10 million company, and they're only doing, $5 million. So there's just way too big of a gap. And that just causes a massive problem. Like I said, it just becomes way inefficient. And what a lot of people tell themselves, like, well, once we get there, we'll already have all the people, so we want to get rid of them. My take on this, again, this is just my take. This isn't financial, legal, accounting advice. This is just my take on it. If we don't need that role for the next 12 months, we don't need it today. When we get to that next point, let's do it. But I see so many companies that, even if they're doing $7 million in revenue, but they have an office of a $10 million company, that means their office is 50% too big, or their payroll is at least 50% too big. Sometimes I see people getting paid way too much to do the job that they're doing because, quote unquote, they've been there a really long time. So they're like family. We can't, we just keep giving them raises every year because they're loyal. But you can't have someone doing a $40,000 job making 80 to 90,000. It's just not sustainable. So you got to do what's best for the business. What's best for the business is what's best for your customers, what's best for the employees there, because we rather eliminate a few roles instead of eliminate the whole company when we run out of money. So the other part of that is not only all of that, but when we go from, call it 3 million to 6 million, the pricing that worked at 3 million does not work at 6 million because we do have more overhead. We do have more, office payroll. And we actually know our costs because at $3 million, many times the owner is still doing a lot of the work. So it gets hidden in there. If our gross margin looks pretty good, but our owner who's not on payroll or they're not in cost of goods sold, they're doing a lot of work in the field. Even if I just run like one call here or there. One call here or there usually means they're running like 5 to 10 calls a week, but they convince themselves that they're just doing it temporarily. So a lot of times our pricing at $3 or $4 million when the owner is still, answering the phone or doing some of the calls or doing some of the sales isn't going to work once we get to 6 million. So we feel the pressure, the owner feels the pressure, and a lot of times we just blame the pricing or the revenue instead of the actual cost structure that we have in place. And then lastly, this is kind of a sneaky one because it convinces people that they are doing things right. But the last one that we're going to go over today is flat rate pricing. So if you're using a flat rate pricing system, but you don't fully understand it, you are probably not charging accordingly because you don't understand your costs. So there are many owners that rely on flat rate pricing, which I am 100% on board for flat rate pricing. It's just got to be the right numbers because, if you get into the labor material, that's a disaster. So flat rate pricing, 100% the way to go. But there are too many owners, too many operators that don't fully understand why they're charging what they're charging. Here's what they assume. They just assume the math is correct. They assume, well, that's what we need to charge because other companies charge that. They assume that, I just added up the labor and the costs and it seems like, we're already charging. It seems like we're charging enough, based on what our costs are. we assume that if we do that, we're already protected. Like I said, that's kind of like one of the biggest, I would say, fallacies is just we believe since we're using flat rate pricing, it must be right and it must solve a lot of the issues. Yes, it solves a lot of issues. It'll solve almost all of them if you're doing it rightly, properly. But if not, it can become super messy super quickly. And lastly, my favorite of the flat rate system is going into a Facebook group and asking someone to use their price book. And they always say, I just want to look at it. I just want to get started. But here's the facts. They borrow, quote unquote, borrow someone else's price book and then just use it. But like, well, they're in North Carolina and it's more expensive in North Carolina than Ohio. And I'm in Ohio. So I'm guessing these prices are probably pretty good since, we just assume all the other companies in the world are doing things properly and we're the only ones not. So don't go into Facebook groups and ask to use someone else's price book. They are running a different business. They are running a different race. They have different goals. They have different cost structure. Again, the cost structure is different. And who's to say they know what they're talking about either? So flat rate systems don't work if you don't know your numbers. They don't work if you don't know your labor efficiency. They don't work if you don't know your fully loaded labor. And many times we never update these flat rate systems once we put them in place, even though our costs have changed. So what happens with all of this? We slowly lose margin. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And what we start to convince ourselves is, we just need to do more revenue. We just need more sales. But when the cost is not aligned with the price, we don't know it at first, but eventually becomes severe over time. What typically happens, our gross margin slowly erodes over time. Depending on your industry, depending on your mix of work, we're shooting for a gross profit, call it around 50%. Some are higher, some are lower. But our margin slowly goes down, but we're not really tracking it. It might go from 52 to 51 to 50 to 49. It might go back up to 50, and it goes back down to 49, 48. And over time, if you're running a $10 million business, if you're losing 5 to 10%, that's $500,000 to $1 million straight to the bottom line. What else happens? Cash flow becomes inconsistent because our numbers are not consistent. And then eventually we get discounting is such a dangerous place to play because then we become addicted to it. For anybody that's old enough to remember when Groupon became very popular, customers, got to the point where I'm only buying from this company if they offer a Groupon. And then the business owners are like, man, our business is terrible unless we offer a Groupon. And then they don't realize what's happening to their margins and their reputation and all that. And again, it's a vicious cycle that nobody wants to get in, because then when we do have a slow week, it's like, oh God, we don't really have any cash to begin with and everything's slow. So let's go back to price. It's got to be a price issue. So let's take the time to look at our cost structure, realize what we actually need to charge to hit our margins. So that way we do have a financially healthy business instead of just fighting all the other things that we think are the problem. Again, like I mentioned in the last episode, when we get into this stuck space, from the outside, the business looks healthy. We're getting the Google reviews. Our trucks are full. We're hiring. Everything feels like it's going well other than cash in the bank because there is no margin for error. One bad week, we lose one technician. We make one bad hire. We have one unexpected bill, and then the pressure mounts. So let's wrap it up. What do the disciplined operators do? They're going to align their pricing with the reality. Their reality is the cost structure. Their cost structure is really dictating. Their cost structure is telling you what are they promising their employees and what are they promising their customers. So going back to all the things that we've talked about, that's where our price is driven from. Our price is driven from the cost that it takes to deliver on our promises to our employees and to our customers. So the disciplined operators don't say, well, what's the market going to tolerate? They don't have someone in their office call around and see what other people are charging. They're going to ask, what does our business require in order to be financially healthy so that we can be in business for the next 5, 10, 15, 50 years? They're going to get clarity on, going back to those 3 things we talked about. They're going to get clarity on what's our actual labor cost. They're going to get clarity on what's our labor efficiency. They're going to get clarity on what is our actual overhead. And then they're actually going to know what do we need to charge from a pricing, call it a flat rate standpoint. So this is a business model decision. This is a decision that we need to make without using our emotion, our ego, or our excuses, because we need to have the right pricing. We need to have the right labor. We need to have the right office staff for the size business that we're at. And when we do all those things, if we are a great operator, our cash pressure eases. We can sleep better at night. We don't have to discount anymore. And we can start to make better decisions because we can make it from a place of confidence, not just let's go work harder and get more revenue to solve these problems. So that is it. If you are doing solid revenue, you're doing all the things, it feels like everything's right except cash, there's a great chance that your cost structure is not aligned with your pricing. So when you need pricing and structure to match, when you get the pricing and the cost structure to match, the business starts to breathe again. You can breathe again. Payroll's not as stressful. And what looks like a successful business from the outside is actually a successful business on the inside. So if you have any questions, if this conversation resonated with you, head on over to my website, thebluecollaradvisors.com. You go there, you can learn more about how we work with owners. What do we focus on? You can book a call with me and have a chat. I have a pricing calculator there as well. That'll actually be very helpful for this conversation so you can figure out exactly what you need to charge. And there are some other additional resources there as well related to the podcast and YouTube and all that good stuff. So this podcast, again, it exists for clarity. It exists so we can use numbers instead of emotion, ego, or excuses. And if this helped provide you a little bit more clarity, a little bit more direction, you are in the right place. Until next time, I'll see you in the next boardroom briefing.